Hello, everyone, and welcome to OHSC Interviews. I'm Vasu Bharadwaj, and I'm your host for today's episode. Today, I'm happy to have with me the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs and the MP for Wellington Halton Hills, Michael Chong. Michael, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
Good, good, good. It's great to have you back on the show. I know you joined us in our earlier seasons, and since then, there's so many developments with the Conservative Party, with the Conservative movement, and whatnot. So it's great to have you back on to discuss some issues today.
Great to be here.
So I would like to start off the interview by usually asking the person we interview, how'd you get started into politics?
Well, I was like you in high school. I believe it was in grade 11, and there was a big debate going on, not just across the country, but also in the local high school that I attended, Centre Wellington District High School in Fergus, Ontario. And we had a debate um, during that, either in grade 11 or 12, I can't remember, I think it was grade 11, about free trade. And there was a pretty heated debate about whether or not Canada should join a free trade agreement with the United States to expand trade beyond our borders. And I got involved with the party in that 1988 debate, supported my local MP at the time, MP Perrin Beatty, and argued strongly for free trade. I believed it was in Canada's interest to be a trading nation. I thought we could compete with the best in the world, and that was my first involvement in politics. And so, like you, I got my start at that age. So great to see you getting involved.
No, it's
Well,
it's
I
great to
was.
hear for anyone to get involved, no matter their age. But it's good to get involved at a young age because at that time, you're still developing your thought of mind, what your beliefs are, and it's good to explore all the options, and it's good to come to a certain consensus at that age. So, I want to hop right into our question and answer segment, and these questions are asked by members of our high school team. So, I want to start off by a question, and this comes from Trefin, and he's from Newmarket, Aurora. He wants to ask you, how would how would a theoretical or hypothetical Polyev government have handled the Roxham Road if you and your party were in government?
Well, that's a great question. We have long argued that we need to ensure that public support for immigration remains strong and remains uh, high. And that in order to achieve high and strong support, public support amongst Canadians across the country for immigration, we need to ensure that our immigration system is orderly, that it is uh, safe, and that it is secure. And Roxham Road ran contrary to that fundamental principle. We have always believed in secure borders. Previous governments of various political stripes have believed in secure borders. It's the reason why the Liberal government of former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien negotiated the Safe Third Country Agreement with the U.S. administration in order to ensure an orderly border uh, where we didn't see some of the chaos that we see elsewhere. And so, coming out of that, that agreement allowed for a safe, secure, and orderly immigration system for more than a decade. But what happened was there was a gap in the legislation, a gap in the agreement that obviously people use to cross the border in at Roxham Road. And so we had long called for the Trudeau government to close it. We see the Trudeau government recently announced that it had reached a deal with the Biden administration to do exactly that. Um, the only difference that we would have done is that we would have focused on this issue much earlier than the Trudeau government did.
Yeah, you're right. There's two key components, and I would really say it's to anything in life, being safe and secure, right? And Roxham Road is just the complete opposite of this. Our country is wide and open, to immigrants and to people who want to come here and create a better future for them and their families, and to one day, get a good job and do this and help create Canada a better country, right? And Roxham Road is, to be honest, the opposite of that because, you start off on the wrong note, coming here illegally, and then also it's not safe and secure. So I highly, highly believe that under a Poilievre government, nothing like that would happen under your guys' nose. And with that, I want to move on to a second question. So there has been a bunch of news about the two Michaels, Han Dong, and whatnot. And Hayden from York Simcoe, he wants to ask, how would a conservative government better serve during the two Michaels incident, and how does that impact your view on foreign affairs?
Well, I think the big approach, the biggest difference in the approach that we would take in government compared to the current government is that we would follow the advice of our intelligence, of Canada's intelligence experts. For years, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service has been warning the government and the public about the threats being presented by the People's Republic of China. They've identified threats in the area of the theft of intellectual property and national security in 5 sensitive areas of research, such as biopharma, artificial intelligence, telecommunications, clean tech, and quantum computing. And so we would take action to ensure that no federal research funding would flow to those projects that are in partnership with entities in the PRC. We would also ban federal funding of partnerships with Beijing's military because we don't think that that is appropriate. The intelligence community has warned us for years about the foreign interference threat activities being perpetrated by agents of Beijing here on Canadian soil. So we would take action to expel those individuals from Canada who are participating in those activities. We would also take measures to ensure that the resources and tools are in place, such as a foreign influence registry, to prosecute individuals who are using coercive and intimidation tactics to target our fellow citizens. So these are some of the things that we would do in partnership with democratic allies to strengthen the safety and security of Canadians.
Yeah, 100%. And it comes back to protecting our own democracy, protecting our own country. And, it's truly sad to see what happened with the two Michaels. But I want to go take a step in the past, back from the Harper government. So this question also comes from Hayden, and he wants to ask you, how did your decision to resign from cabinet after Harper declared Quebec as a separate nation reflect your stance on nationalism and immigration?
Well, look, that was a debate almost 20 years ago. What I will say, though, is this. Look, I believe strongly in a citizenship-centered democracy where citizenship is the foundation of what ties us together as some 38 million Canadians living on the north half of this vast continent. It's citizenship that should define who we are, a citizenship that is robust, a citizenship that has clearly defined rights and responsibilities. And I think if we approach citizenship and nationalism and immigration from that point of view, I think we can build an even stronger country together. And so I think that also means that all Canadian citizens, regardless of their national origin, regardless of their ethnocultural backgrounds, regardless of where they came from, regardless of their race, religion, or creed, should all share in common equal rights and equal responsibilities. And I think that should be foundational to how we approach issues around citizenship and immigration.
Yeah, no. So what would you say towards do you think a Poilievre government would take that same stance?
Yes, I think Mr. Poilievre has indicated that he believes fundamentally in freedoms, in creating greater freedom for Canadians. And so I think that ties in very directly with my view that freedom is freedom, rights and freedoms that we all share in common. are the base of one of the foundations of our society. So, absolutely, I think that fundamental rights and freedoms are a foundational part of Canadian citizenship. Fundamental rights and freedoms centered around citizenship.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of Pierre Poilievre, he's been probably one of the most vocal people about the cost of living crisis and, when it comes to housing, when it comes to groceries and whatnot. So I want to move on to our last question, which comes from Vincent in Oakville, North Burlington. And he wants to ask you, given the housing shortage in Canada, if voted into office, will the Conservative Party of Canada drastically change the number of refugees Canada plans to accept every year from current levels, and why?
So look, we believe in safe, secure, and orderly immigration. We also believe in ensuring that Canada welcomes refugees from around the world who are being persecuted, who are being pushed out of their communities because of war and conflict and authoritarian states. So we believe strongly that Canada should be a welcoming country for people around the world in a safe, orderly, and secure fashion. With respect to the housing crisis, the government has made a complete mess of it. The Trudeau government has overseen a doubling in the price of a house and a doubling in the cost of rent over the last number of years. And this has resulted in a true housing crisis where many, if not most, middle class Canadians can no longer afford to purchase a home in pretty much any part of the country and can no longer afford to pay a reasonable amount of rent. And so the government clearly has the wrong plan for housing. Our belief, my belief in particular, is that we've got to do a better job of regulating our financial system in order to ensure a more reasonable rate of credit growth so that we don't add to the housing appreciation unduly that has created the sky high housing prices. We also need to take a look at, I believe, the lack of purpose built apartment buildings. Since the 1980s, we've built almost no apartment buildings in this country. If you look at the data prior to 1980, we built a lot of apartment buildings. But in the 1970s and 80s and 90s, a series of changes were brought in by federal, provincial, and municipal governments that prevented the construction of apartment buildings, which is why rents have become so expensive and why people have trouble finding housing. The measures that were brought in at the time was first capital gains taxes that are applied to apartment buildings, which are not applied to non-apartment buildings. We've got, in many cases, a higher rate of property taxes being paid per dollar of assessment on apartment buildings that other classes of dwellings do not have to pay at the same rate. We've also got, in many cases, lower municipal services for apartment buildings. In many cases, the landlord is responsible for the garbage and recycling collection of apartment buildings and not the municipality. In addition, rent controls and other municipal and municipal zoning issues have also played a role in making apartment buildings very difficult to construct. So as a result, if you look at our apartment buildings in Canada, almost all of them were built prior to the 1980s, and very little, I think only 3% per decade of the 1990s, of the aughts, and of the 2010s. 3% per decade of our apartment housing stock has been built in the last 30 years. So if you look at the big picture, roughly 10% of our apartment buildings have been built in the last 3 decades. 90% were built before 1990. And I think that says a lot about the housing problem we face in this country, is that there simply isn't enough purpose-built apartments for people to rent and move into, particularly for immigrants who come here and initially their first step into the housing market is to rent a place. So I think we need to tackle that problem, among others, in order to address what is a major crisis in this country.
Yeah, no,
Our
100%. I mean, like, for example, my parents, when they first came here, they had a dream, right? And that was to work hard, to get a good job, and to one day raise a family here in Canada. And they were able to do that under the Harper government because life was affordable back then, right? You have immigrants coming now with a big dream, big hopes, and they want to work hard. But unfortunately, under this Trudeau government, they aren't able to achieve those because the affordability crisis has made prices sky high for Canadians. But thank you so much, Michael Chong, for your time today. It's great for you to join us, and we really thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, and all the best in your studies. And I want to commend you for getting involved and getting involved in politics, showing an interest in it. It's your generation that will eventually take the reins of power and guide our country into the future. So thank you very much for having me on your show.
Thank you.